Happy New Year, everybody. I hope it's treating you well so far. Today we're having a look at Reaxis, a new plugin by Mercuriall. It is a plugin that emulates the Mesa Triaxis preamp, which is a bit of a classic in the rack community. Metallica used one to tour with, John Petrucci used one to tour with, countless other guys. It's probably the one piece of gear that I don't have in my personal rack that I wish I had. I've been looking for a Triaxis for years. But the idea is essentially, if you have a look onto the screen, which I'll bring up now, you've got 8 different modes, and Mesa sell it as this idea of you're sort of buying decades of boogie tone or some other kind of marketing spiel like that. But the idea is you've got 2 very clean modes, you've got 3 medium gain modes and 3 high gain modes, and the high gain modes are essentially based around like the Mark IV, the Mark II-C+, and depending on the circuit revision, a rectifier or a Lone Star. I would have to check with Mercurial. I'm assuming that the lead to red on this is a rectifier, rectifier style, but that's what we've got. We've also got Overdrive Pedals available. There's 3 stomp boxes, a TS808, which you can swap between a sort of stock mode and a modified mode, higher and lower gain, and then an 808 and a TS7, which I think is pretty interesting. Then there's a Crybaby 535 model, which is very cool. We'll get into that in a second, and very handy a noise gate. Then you've got access in the amp and cab section to different cab models and different power amp models. You can choose between a single-ended 6L6, PP6L6, and an EL34, which all have different characters. You've also got a presence control there. I'd assume that the stock one that comes up is based on like a Mesa 290. Again, you have to check with Mercurial if they're going to tell you that, but the power amp modeling is really, really cool. And then we've got access to a couple of different speakers, namely a few modern ones, obviously the Vintage 30, the G12T75, I guess the stock hard rock and metal speakers. Then there's a G12M and there's a Vintage K120, which is pretty cool. And then all of those versions with EQ applied, which I assume is just like a high and low pass. So moving on from there, you can also choose different microphones and blend 2 microphones, which is a very, very cool feature. So many of these plugins, you can only choose one mic, and for those who listen to my channel and tune in quite a bit, you know that I love the 57-121 combination, so I'm just going to stick with that. You can control the blend between the 2 microphones. You can also change the position, which is very cool. And then we've got some post effects, namely a chorus, some reverb, and some delay. So it's a very self-contained little plugin. What you heard at the start of the clip was a little preset I made with the lead to yellow mode. We'll go from here and just have a listen to some of the basic controls. So we'll start on that lead to yellow mode. That's the big selling point for the Triaxis. It models a Mesa Mark II-C+, which is very famous for very good reasons. So the controls, you've got an input gain. I'll play around with that, and then we'll just go through the controls and have a look at what each of them do. So the input gain, I'll turn these off. I'll leave the gate on though. So we'll start with the gain quite low, and I'll just crank it up while I'm playing. So there, you can hear that the character changes a little bit with this input control, just like a real Mark series amp or a real Triaxis, where with the gain quite low, your input gain's a little bit brighter, and as you turn it up, not only does it add more gain, it gets darker as well. Now, moving on to the EQ section, the EQ in a Triaxis and the EQ in a Mark series amp is before the gain, and if you've watched my AX8 videos and things like that, I talk about this quite a lot. You don't set this the way you would set like a Marshall style amp, you set it more the way you would set a Fender amp. So bass quite low, middle, again, quite lower than you would expect, I think, you know, if you're used to dialing in these kind of tones. And then you normally have to get the treble past noon for it to really cut. So these three controls, together with, in this case, the lead 2 drive, if we were on a lead 1 channel, it would be lead 1 drive, radically shape the gain structure. Then you've got this dynamic voice control, which is kind of like the 5-band EQ on a Mark Series amp. And as you turn this up, it gives you more of that V-shape scoop. So it's a little bit of a compromise. You know, I imagine a lot of people complained when they designed the Triaxis that they didn't put a post 5-band EQ in there, but the dynamic voice is a pretty good compromise, and it works just like the real Triaxis. If we have it quite low, it's flatter and midier. Let's have a listen. I'll just slowly turn it up as I play. The thing that I like to do with this is, I'll go back to I'll bring the preset up the way it was. This is what I had set up. You can see treble around 6, middle at 3, bass in 2. They're just my go-to with a Mark Series style amp. The presence quite low. I find if you get the presence too high, it gets really ice picky at high volumes. I'll show you what I mean. Turn this drive block off. So that's with the presence at 1. Which is basically what the presence control does on a real Mark Series amp. So I like to keep that quite low, around 1 or 2, depending on, you know, how the mix sounds, more or less. Playing on my own, it sounds good about 1. If I was, you know, if this was in a really dense mix, you might want to turn the presence up a little bit to help it cut. You can also obviously tweak the presence in the amp block. And let's have a listen to how the different power tube amp models sound. I'll just turn that down because it's a little bit louder. Let's have a listen. So you can hear there's plenty of actual change in character there, which is nice. A lot of guitar power amp modeling, I find, just, you know, it sounds like they just applied a static EQ curve there. These respond a little bit different, which is nice. It actually sounds the way you would expect an EL34 style power amp to sound in comparison to a 6L6 power amp. So now that we've had to play around with that, basically setting up a tone using Reaxis, I love throwing on the Super Overdrive pedal. It's my go-to in the real world as well, so I'm pretty stoked that that's included. You can see there, tone cranked up, level all the way up, drive low, you know, modern metal settings basically. Let's have a listen to that on there. So there you go, super easy to set up a tone. Let's have a play around with some of the different modes. What I've done is just create a couple of presets to do this. So that's a very in-depth look at one particular mode. It's my favorite one. It's the C+ mode, the lead to yellow mode on the Triaxis. Sounds exactly the way you want it to sound. But let's have a listen to some of the other modes in there for people who might be watching this who, do more than just play the low C string on a, humbucker guitar. So let's start with like a cleanish kind of sound. Here's the rhythm yellow mode. And we can try some Tube Screamer in front of that. That might be nice. And you can hear that I've got delay, reverb, and a little bit of chorus turned on. I can turn those on and off using this very intuitive little panel here. Let's have a look at what the post effects can do. The chorus is lovely in this. If I crank the depth and the mix up a little bit, you get a better idea of what it does. I'll turn that drive block off. And I think this is such a cool feature. I don't have to actually go back to the pre-effects tab. I can just do it here. Well thought out. Being a fan of the 80A-MP1, which is essentially the godfather of units like the Triaxis, is the chorus effect. Now, in the 80A-MP1, if you set the rate all the way off and the depth all the way up, you get this very cool stereo widening effect. If you set the depth and the speed to 0 and turn the mix all the way up on Reaxis, you get a very similar effect. It's probably the closest thing that I've heard to this 80A chorus, and if you love 80s rock music like I do, this is unbelievable. This is what it sounds like with the chorus off. Reverb, we've got a couple of different varieties. We can start with the chamber and just flick through them. So the delay sounds awesome, and in parallel with some reverb, you get some awesome ambient bass effects. So kudos to Mercuriall for building this in. It is way more than just a heavy metal machine. You basically get any type of guitar sound you like out of this plugin. Let's have a little bit more of a listen to through the differences between each of the modes. I'll go to my main preset, so I'll keep the EQ kind of the same, and we'll just go through the lead 2 modes, the lead 1 modes, and the rhythm modes. Here's the yellow mode. And then finally, let's play around with the cab models a little bit. I'll show you each of the different speaker types. It's pretty hip. I'm going to try and play the same thing with the same preset just to give you an idea of what it does. And again, what I like is like the V30s sound like V30s, the 75s sound like 75s. And we can move the mic positioning, which is even better, even more versatile, I should say. And we can move the mic positioning, which is a very handy feature, especially for reamping. So let's do it. So that's a pretty comprehensive overview of all the features in Reaxis. As you can see, it's very, very true to the original Triaxis in the way it sounds. And then there's lots and lots of handy, well thought out features and a very good user interface. This could very well become my go-to guitar plugin when I just want to plug in, I don't want to mic an amp, or I don't have my AX8 available, if I just want to plug straight into the interface and do some recording. And also I do a lot of teaching in this room, so being able to plug two different guitars in and fire up a great sounding high gain amp sound or a great sounding clean amp without chewing up too much DSP on my computer is an absolute godsend. What I will do now is I'll play through a couple of the presets that I made, a couple of different sounds, ranging from the sort of chunky stuff that I've been focusing on to like an 80s hair metal sound and some cleaner stuff. So if you enjoyed this, please hit the subscribe button and check out Mercuriall Reaxis. It's a very, very good guitar plugin.